Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak on the question that is, should we suspend standing orders to consider this bill this evening? And absolutely, I do not support that in any way, shape or form, Mr. President, and I apologise in advance if I'm a little bit inarticulate in my contribution, because I'm really struggling to grapple with the fact that we perhaps could have to be debating this tonight, and as the member for Montgomery just said, trying to process what you're going to say in response to this question at the same time as considering if we do have to debate this, how am I going to vote, is quite a lot for the brain to handle in a week where we are coming to the end of a sitting week. We've had a number of different issues to consider today. We started with Greyhound briefings, a really important bill that we are considering, and we had a number of briefers before us in this morning in relation to that topic, which is very important to many Tasmanians. Then we moved on to UTAS, and we're considering that issue, which again is really important to many Tasmanians. Then all of a sudden, in amongst that, we get a ministerial statement from the Premier saying all of a sudden you need to turn your attention to this issue, or we are in the other place turning attention to this issue. And then some messages come around, we might sit late tonight to consider this. We don't even know what this is at that time, because we're too busy, our minds, in these other issues, because that is what we are here to do today. And if there was demonstrated urgency on this issue, quite prepared to sit late, quite prepared to do all I can to understand the issue. But in order to be able to understand the issue, I need to know what I don't know. And if I haven't even read the bill, haven't read the second reading speech, haven't been able to consider the Hansard, the debate in the other place, which I often will read to help my understanding with this, with any issue, I haven't been able to properly consider it, Mr. President. And I don't feel I'm in a position to be able to do my job properly. Every member's entitled to their view on how they do their job and when they feel well equipped, and we're all different in that regard, right? That's our prerogative. How we like to consider issues, how we like to address issues, how we like to inform ourselves. We're all different. There's no right or wrong in that, and we're all different. But for me personally, I like to make informed decisions. I'm not informed on this issue. I don't have an advisor who is on standby to be able to inform me on this right now. In fact, well, perhaps, anyway, it's not about comparing, Mr. President. I'm not going to engage in debate while I have the floor with other members, but it's not actually not about comparisons even. It's right now, I don't feel equipped to be able to properly consider this tonight and be a voice for the people that I represent, and genuinely do my job properly. And that floors me to have to consider that I might have to do that. In the briefing, we heard, Mr. President, we don't have a shortage of fuel in the state. There is no supply issue at the moment. We also heard then, on the other hand, but we have no clear picture of how much fuel we have in the state, how much is in the tanks. But we know the same sort of volumes have been coming into the state, so we have confidence in the supply at the moment, right now. We don't need the law to be able to get this information tomorrow.
Yeah, we do.
Not necessarily tomorrow. We know the same sort of volumes have been coming into the state. We are assured, the Premier has been assuring Tasmanians that we have sufficient fuel supply right now. Yet we know that it is a rapidly changing issue. We know that things are changing at a rapid pace. I appreciate and accept that, Mr. President. We also know, though, we've known for a week. We've known for a few weeks, in fact, that that's the case, that this is a rapidly changing issue. Yet we've had briefings this week on issues that we're not debating this week. And I'm not going to complain about that, because I appreciate that. I appreciate briefings in advance. I appreciate not having to be briefed the day of a bill. But in this instance, it's being briefed an hour before trying to debate a bill, Mr. President. It just floors me, absolutely blows my mind that as a Legislative Council, a House of Review, we could be expected to do that. I too appreciate, as other members have acknowledged, the Deputy Premier in giving his time to attend the briefing, and he asked the question, have the briefers adequately answered your questions? Well, I don't know what questions to ask yet because I haven't properly read the bill. You know, I haven't properly considered the issues. I haven't heard from stakeholders. I don't know what the unintended consequences possibly could be. Again, we're being asked to, you know, trust us here. Mr. President, trust us that we know what we're doing here. And Mr. President, this morning when I heard there was going to be a National Cabinet meeting on Monday, I thought, oh, that's interesting. Perhaps we might, depending on the outcomes of National Cabinet, we might have to recall Parliament next week if there are urgent legislative measures that need to be implemented as a result of National Cabinet. Fine, that's what we'll do if that's what's in the best interest of Tasmanians, and I'd be prepared to do that if that was the case. And that could still happen, right? That could still happen. We could consider, possibly even pass this legislation tonight. We could be back here next week because National Cabinet decided that actually all the states have agreed they're going to do this, this and this, and they're going to do it next week. So why not wait and see what the agreement is at National Cabinet and then deal with it? That's what we could do, Mr. President, if we don't consider this tonight, if we wait. And that is certainly my preference. The member for Mersey, I appreciate him conveying the feedback that we've received from a couple of stakeholders, and whether they have vested interests or not. They are key stakeholders, right? And we consider the feedback from stakeholders on every issue, whether they have vested interests or not. It doesn't mean it's more or less valuable for us to consider, and certainly I pride myself on taking that into account in all the decisions I make. So I'm not prepared to consider this tonight, and if we do get to the point where we will, I'm very minded not to support it. Of course, I'll listen to the debate, but I just don't feel like I'm in a position where I can possibly support it. So I don't support suspension of standing orders to consider this.
Question is...
Thank you, Mr. President. I will try and keep my contribution brief, noting it is just about to go midnight, and I understand the other place is waiting for us to finish our debate on this and make our decision so they can consider it. And again, it is a regrettable situation that we find ourselves in, only just having been in a very late hour sitting back in December that I think had a significant impact on all of us. And it's got to be said, Mr. President, at times this does not feel like a safe work environment when we sit from 9 a.m. in the morning in briefings through to midnight, and it's not a safe work environment for the staff at Parliament either. And I think this is something that needs seriously addressing, has significant impacts on families as well, and that I think that has to be said, and we need to start actually doing something to address that. And also not conducive to good decision making when you're trying to make decisions at midnight, when you've barely had a break all day, Mr. President. It's not right. But on this bill, Mr. President, it's being presented as a set of miscellaneous amendments. But when you look at what it actually does, it is anything but minor. It introduces significant new powers, it increases penalties, and it removes important safeguards. And Mr. President, all of what I say is based on a very superficial analysis, given the very limited time we've had to consider this. But one of the most concerning elements is there is a new power for the director to compel information. This power is triggered when the minister determines there is a serious risk to energy supply, but this threshold, serious risk, is not clearly defined and entirely rests on the minister's opinion. How is serious risk defined? I wonder if the leader can advise the House in the reply. But whatever it is, once that threshold is met, a person can be compelled to provide information, and critically, they are no longer able to object on the basis that that information is commercially sensitive or a trade secret. This is a significant step. We're effectively saying that, in certain circumstances, the government can require the disclosure of sensitive commercial information without the usual protections. At the same time, the bill significantly increases penalties, up to 1,000 penalty units for a body corporate for failing to comply with these requirements or for providing incorrect information. So we are expanding powers and increasing penalties while reducing safeguards. And all of this might be warranted, Mr. President, it might. But I simply have not had sufficient time to consider this, to consider the risks, to consider the unintended consequences, or to hear from the industry, stakeholders who will be affected. The bill also allows for greater use of regulations to set rules and requirements, including around codes of practice, with fewer of the consultation safeguards that would normally apply. This shifts power away from Parliament into the hands of the executive. And all of this is being done under urgency. However, there has been no compelling explanation as to why a bill of this nature, with these kinds of changes, cannot be properly considered in the ordinary course. We've been presented with no compelling evidence of urgency. No evidence of engagement with stakeholders. No evidence of engagement with stakeholders. And if the leader can advise us what consultation has occurred, because I did hear some reference to it, it would be really enlightening to hear who has been consulted and when it comes to stakeholders on this bill. Further, Mr President, we have seen no documentary evidence that distributors are not complying with existing requirements. We've just received a verbal or heard a verbal assertion that they are not complying. So I ask, if the issue is a lack of information or a refusal to provide it, how hard has the government actually tried to obtain it? What mechanisms have been used under the current framework? What requests have been made? And what responses were received? Because those questions go to the heart of whether these expanded powers are justified at all. Mr President, I also go to the narrative around this and community expectations and the importance of being clear with the community about what the government is doing here. Headlines like "Giving Tasmanians a fair go at the Bowser" are misleading, Mr President. That's not what this bill is about. If this bill passes tonight, I urge the government to think about that, because I noted in response to the Premier's post outlining what the government had done today in the other place, what it was putting forward, some of the comments were, "Great, what will the maximum price be? Great, Premier, that's great. What will the maximum price be? And when will it be set? Tomorrow, can we be assured of a maximum fuel price?" That's how these messages are received, Mr President. That's not what this bill is doing. Mr President, this House has a responsibility to scrutinise legislation, particularly where it expands power, reduces safeguards and increases penalties. And on that basis, I cannot support the bill.